We recognize how important leadership and vision is to unite us to achieve gender equality and the SDGs. WEPs principle number 1 says that leadership promotes gender equality. It applies to business, yes, but equally and powerfully to governments, as we all know, equality under the law is crucial. Gender equality extends into all our social norms. His Excellency Mr. Guillermo Solís Rivera, President of Costa Rica, made that clear last September at the UN when he pledged to put at the Public Policy Center the shared responsibility for caregiving as an engine for cultural change, to create good jobs for women through public-private partnerships, and to work tirelessly within the framework of the United Nations to achieve its objectives. Adding, and I hope it's not controversial to repeat, his support for the election of a woman as the next UN Secretary General. Mr. President, a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all. Ms. Fomsile Mlambo Nkuka, Undersecretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, Mr. Luis Alberto Moreno, President of the Inter-American Development Bank, Ms. Lise Kingo, Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact, Excellencies, distinguished guests, my friends. Today is a very stimulating day for me. This morning we held the inaugural meeting of the High-Level Panel on Women's Economic Empowerment, where we discussed a series of actions and concrete guidelines to work towards this goal. And now I have the honor of addressing you, who, as members of the business sector, civil society, government, and the United Nations, have a unique opportunity to implement real long-term changes for gender equality and the empowerment of women. The time is right. International consensus has been reached based on the Beijing +20 platform for action and the 2030 agenda about the importance for global sustainable development of achieving gender equality and empowering women and girls. More than ever, today we understand that achieving these goals is not an exclusive task of women or of specific national or international sectors, but the result of strategic alliances working jointly to provide insights and resources for policy reform and implementation. Economically empowering women involves removing cultural, social, and labor barriers to entering into the productive world and fully exercising their rights. It implies recognizing and valuing fairly all their paid and unpaid work within a framework of gender equality, respect, and peace. It also involves directly influencing other areas, physical, sexual, and political, because an economically empowered woman has fundamental tools to have more effective control over her body and the surrounding environment. In the last 3 decades, there have been noteworthy advances in both fronts. As recorded by UN Women in the report on the progress of women 2015-2016 and other international and regional agencies, more countries today have a legal framework that guarantees and protects the rights of women. More females participate in political and economic decision-making. More girls, adolescents, and grown women are enrolled in the educational system than ever before. Women participation in the labor force has increased, and in some regions, that has had a significant impact in the reduction of poverty, such has been the case of Latin America, by the way. There is more awareness about gender discrimination at the workplace, and more regulations on the topic have been enacted. And today, we have segregated information by gender in more countries around the world, providing better information to guide our policies. However, we know the road ahead is long and actions to be taken are not simple. We need to move from normative gender equality to a substantive equality, from discourse to practice, and from sensitivity about the problem to action. And we have to achieve this in a complicated context. On the one hand, climate change, world economic conditions, global political affairs, and armed conflicts, among others, divert our attention from the topics at hand and compete for already stretched out public resources. Furthermore, the sheer magnitude of these situations and events may end up exacerbating the existing gaps between men and women impeding further advance. On the other hand, enforcing the existing legal framework that protects women's rights and fosters economic empowerment continually faces social prejudices learned at home and reinforced by the educational system, the media, the workplace, and cultural representations that relegate women to a private and reproductive role while assigning men a predominant public and productive role, a world that embodies some of the highly esteemed values in today's societies, such as money, success, or power. Disassembling this complicated scaffold in our current circumstances is not easy, but it is imperative. There is growing evidence about the economic consequences and the redistributive power of increasing women's participation in the labor market. For example, in 2015, the McKinsey Global Institute estimated that promoting gender equality could add US $12 trillion to global economic growth. UN Women's Progress of Women 2015-2016 report explains how those regions of the world where female participation in the labor market increased, such as Latin America again, saw notable reductions in poverty and income distribution become less skewed. In 2014, after running several scenarios, the Economic Commission for Latin America concluded that equating female labor participation rates and reducing the gender wage could have a powerful multiplying effect over poverty levels and income distribution. Other research has found that those companies where there is a more equal gender representation at senior VP level tend to have better business performance than other types of companies. Given this evidence, it is clear that we are missing out on a significant demographic bonus of human talent and productivity, just because we keep thinking and doing the same as always. The question is, knowing of its existence, can we afford to continue literally wasting this potential any longer? Can we afford to wait until, say, the year 2095, when the World Economic Forum estimated that gender equality could be attained if we keep moving at the present pace? The obvious answer to these questions is no, we cannot. We have to act now, and we have to do it in coordination with private companies, community groups, local and national governments, civil society, and women's organizations. This is how we are envisioning the issue in Costa Rica, the nation I represent and lead. In spite of its small size and despite being a developing nation, Costa Rica has a rather vast experience in some of the areas we need to address today if we want to improve women's stance in the world. We have a more than centennial democracy that exists, that exalts, defends, and promotes the rule of law and respect for human rights. The defense of labor rights and our social security system are at the core of our political stability. Our social security system offers health and pension benefits comparable to those of most developed nations. In 1948, we abolished the armed forces, a decision that liberated many resources that were used to invest in other social programs, such as public education. Nowadays, the government is obliged to devote 8% of our GDP to public education. This has been one of the cornerstones of our public policies in the country. It has demanded sizable attention to resources for decades, yielding noticeable results. The national literacy rate average is 97.6%. On the other hand, we are recognized as one of the countries with the largest system of protected natural areas that covers about 25% of the national territory. For over 6 decades, we placed clean energy sources at the core of our energetic national energy matrix. In the last few months, Costa Rica's economy has been growing at a rate of over 4%, with inflation rate has been close to zero for over a year. Foreign investments levels have been stable at around $2 billion a year. Our exchange rate has remained stable for a long time. Excuse me that I'm bragging so much, but you'll see the point. You'll see the point just in a second. And recently, Costa Rica built the first model of aerospace companies of Central America, and our Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz, an astronaut, is developing the plasma rocket that will take the next generation of astronauts to the moon. To Mars. It should be Mars. Yes, also to the moon, but to Mars. Despite all these achievements, my country is not exempt from gender inequality. Women face higher unemployment rates than men, and their participation in the labor market is rather meager. Only 1 out of every 2 women participates in the labor market, and only 51% of them do so in the formal economy. Female unemployment is 3 percentage points higher than male unemployment. Furthermore, on average, women earn 28% less than men performing comparable tasks. Given the low participation of women in the labor market, Costa Rica has the highest gender gap in social coverage in Latin America. Every year, 14,000 teenage girls become pregnant in Costa Rica, and 90% of those cases, the father is twice their age. In 2015, 61.7% of women responded in a survey that they had suffered street harassment at some point in their lives. Female representation in Congress decreased in the last legislative elections, standing at 33%. This happened in spite of an existing law that requires gender equality in candidates. Nonetheless, this percentage still sits above the Latin American average. In the last municipal elections, just a couple of months ago, out of 81 mayors, only 12 women were elected. If all this happens in a country like mine, that shows surprisingly high levels of human development, what can we expect in other countries with harsher challenges? In response to the current situation I have sketched up to this point, last week's Costa Rica government presented the third action plan of the National Gender Equality and Equity Strategy. The plan is focused on fighting the hardcore obstacles that prevent full economic empowerment of women and gender equality. Inspired on previous experiences and learning gathered through almost a decade of implementation of these plans, because this is the third one we implement, the plan reaffirms our commitment to promoting women's participation in the labor market with comparable wages to those of men, eradicating the sexual division of labor, and fostering female economic autonomy and quality of life as a necessary condition to the full exercise of their other rights. The third action plan considers working closely with private firms and civil society in order to build over past achievements. We have made progress in promoting female entrepreneurship by creating a one-stop service made possible by the extensive coordination between several ministries and public institutions. These joint efforts help to consolidate the National Network for Social and Economic Support of Women, resulting in the creation of 2 programs which aim to promote, support, and expand female entrepreneurs' access to markets while helping them at different stages of their business ventures. As part of our telecommunications strategy, we created a program to facilitate business women to internet at low cost, access to internet at low cost. We are in the process of creating a unified record of companies to start generating statistical data about women's participation in our business and productive sectors. We have undertaken affirmative actions in the agricultural sector to assess women's contribution to the production and to promote their access to productive resources. We have also undertaken affirmative action for land titling and providing technical assistance for women. We have promoted policies in the financial sector, sensitizing and promoting laws like the Development Bank Act. Currently, several public financial institutions are offering products and programs tailored to the specific needs of women, the financial specific needs of women. We have strengthened the labor rights of domestic paid workers and raised awareness of their contribution to the economy of child and dependent care. I invite businesses, civil society representatives and colleagues from other governments to incorporate the 7 women's empowerment principles proposed by UN Women and Global Compact in their day-to-day work environments, their market relations, and in their community activities. These principles present a clear path to action that has received the support of over 1,100 businesses or leaders around the world. The second one of these principles, the one that promotes fair treatment of women and men at the workplace by respecting and supporting human rights and non-discrimination, includes one of the specific topics that earlier today we underscored as a central issue that could impact several spheres, public, labor, and family dynamics at the same time. This issue posits the need to assume a social responsibility for child and dependent care. Decisive efforts are needed to provide this type of care not only for poor families, but also for medium-income families. This requires more active participants than collaborative men and appropriate public policies. It also involves businesses, as they can offer flexibility and opportunity to their employees, both male and women, so they may tend their family obligations in a more equitable fashion. We believe a strategy centered on the social responsibility of child and dependent care will have profound ramifications because of its multidimensional reach. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm convinced that all the efforts we make to facilitate women's participation in the economy will be immediately beneficial. After all, a society that puts gender equality and the empowerment of women at its forefront not only grows economically, but also becomes more human. I thank you very much.
Mr. President, thank you so much. You made it clear that meaningful action leading to change is within our reach, but political will is essential. We will be revisiting some of these thoughtful remarks throughout this event.